It wasn't like that at all. My husband, I met on board ship when it came on a publicity trip to Bournemouth, and he was the helicopter officer, and I was working at Poole Hospital at the time, and he risked a court-martial flying his helicopter around the hospital.
Hello, welcome to Beneath the Page, the podcast about books and the writers behind them. I'm Sophie Beal.
And I'm Steve Couch. And today's episode is another one of our special Books Beside My Bed podcasts. Rather than focusing on getting to know the writer behind the books, this time we're going to be getting to know the reader behind the books and asking someone for kind of their desert island discs of the books that they go back to in lots of different ways. Sophie, you're going to introduce our guest.
Well, today's guest is our good friend Mary Collingwood Hurst, who we know from Bournemouth Writing Festival, and her business card reads that she is author, broadcaster, singer, guitarist, and part-time fairy godmother.
Yes, thank you.
How does one apply for a job as a part-time fairy godmother?
Oh, it's granted to you, usually by making a lot of mistakes. That's why I'm only part-time.
Mary,
yes,
we're going to be talking a lot about your favourite books
yes.
and the books that have meant a lot to you over the years.
Yes.
But first of all, as we said, you are a writer. How did you get into writing?
You could say I've been a writer since the age of 4, because when I was 4, I had diphtheria and polio at the same time, taken into an isolation unit and was paralysed from the neck down.
Wow.
This was in 1947, which has immediately given my age away, so I don't know why I bothered with the makeup. I wasn't allowed toys or books,
Wow.
and the only way I could keep going was I made up stories in my head. And then when I eventually came out, it took me a year to walk again, but I could write, and so I started putting my stories down on paper. One day when I was about 5, maybe 6, an Echo reporter, and in those days there was the Bournemouth Times as well.
Right.
I had a bit of an audience with them. It was when I was at the Pavilion. I was supposed to be in a show, and my mother had lost me and found me up in the up in the balcony with all these reporters around me, and she was absolutely furious. And she said, "Oh, don't listen to her," and dragged me away. But they wanted my story, so they printed it. So that's really how I started.
Fantastic. And tell us a bit about the books that you've written more recently.
Well, I went through a spate of writing for Ladybird right back in the late 1970s and early 80s, because I had 2 children at that stage, and I was fed up with the children's stories that were coming out. They were so boring for parents to read, so I thought I would do my own. And I was lucky. Lynn Bradbury, who was the editor of Ladybird then, took a liking to them, so she bought some. But then, being a Navy wife, we were then posted to Hong Kong, so I had to stop all that. And when I came back, Ladybird had been swallowed up by the big publishers.
Right.
I had a rather hectic time because I went through a divorce, and then my poor youngest son got leukemia and things like that, so that stopped me from writing for a bit. But then when I did go back, I wrote the first book, proper book, was Green Smarty's Tales of a Navy Wife, which is the story of being a Navy wife for 20 years, which was unusual. It sounds boring because you think, oh, a Navy wife should be sitting at her home doing knitting, waiting for the ships. It wasn't like that at all. My husband, I met on board ship when it came on a publicity trip to Bournemouth, and he was the helicopter officer, and I was working at Poole Hospital at the time, and he risked a court-martial flying his helicopter around the hospital for me. So I thought, this man's got guts, So I thought, right, we got married, and we were supposed to be going on a posting to Cornwall to live a happy married life in the married quarters for a while, but then suddenly they said he was going on his own to Singapore for a year, which was a bit of a shock. But so my husband said, well, you don't have to stay behind, you can hitch a lift with the RAF, which I did for £7, and we lived in an old, very rundown flat in a little Chinese village called Chong Pang, and had a car that was so rusty you could see the road through the floorboards. So we had a lot of adventures out there. Then I came back to Portsmouth, started the family, and then we went to Hong Kong. I won't go through the whole thing, but we ended up being bugged by MI5, so it was not a normal wife, being a normal wife. But there are stories about other Navy wives in there as well. And then the second book, The Stealth Virus Conspiracy, was about the leukemia, and I did a lot of research while I was living in Southampton Hospital into how it might have started with my son. And I won't go into a lot of detail, but as a result, I was contacted by the head virologist of the World Health Laboratory up in beyond London, who said, come up and spend the day with me because you as a mother have come to the same conclusion as an eminent American scientist. And actually, as a result of that, a certain vaccination was changed.
And is that book a fictionalised account of that, or is it a non-fiction?
Most of it is non-fiction, but it's written as a novel because, quite rightly, my son is very protective about that time.
Yes.
I'm glad to say he's still here, and thanks to some wonderful medical people, and he had a bone marrow transplant. My daughter was the match, but she was married, and she'd just discovered she was pregnant when they found...
No. Oh, not no.
Yeah, so all that's in the book, but it's written as a novel. And also I didn't want to get bumped off by the big farmers because of what I discovered. And then Nellie and Sybil sagas, they're really some light reading.
So they're short stories.
Short stories about two ladies of my age and the antics we get up to, really, which again are based on truth.
And then you've written something more recently, haven't you?
I've written a trilogy of In the Bottle series. There's Island in a Bottle, Schooner in the Bottle, and The Lighthouse in a Bottle. Now, this is especially written for young people going through the sort of crises that they are, ex-COVID and all the rest of it, and also with social media. I actually based it on a wonderful real ship's bottle that some sailor had made in about the 1800s.
I was fascinated with ships in bottles.
It's one of the proper ones, and it's got a bit of an island with a castle and a church on it, and a schooner and a little tiny boat. So I thought I must have that because bought it in a junk shop. I beg your pardon, it was the Curiosity Centre at Dorchester, and it's not a junk shop, everyone. It's absolutely marvellous. I go there every time. Anyway, I bought it, and I knew one day I would write a story about it, but I wasn't quite sure what. And then during COVID, my writer's block suddenly lifted, and I suddenly realised that's where I would go. Although it's a fantasy, they are fantasy books, there are messages subliminal. I can't say it now.
I know what you mean.
Will you say it for me?
I can't. Now you've asked
thank
me.
you so much. The gentleman's got it. Anyway, which really are to help people going through the sort of terrible times.
Yeah.
So that's it.
So let's get to your own reading now. Can you tell us your favourite comfort read, the book you go back to again and again?
Well, I do have one actually, and it's The Wind in the Willows by Kenneth Grahame. I loved it as a child, I love it as an adult, and the reason being he's so clever because each of those characters, you know someone who is like that. I've known many toads in my life.
I think you have actually hearing some of your stories.
Yes. I've known many toads in my life, and ratties who are the constant friend, you know, the gentleman, and the mole who's really not very self-confident, but he learns about it. I just love it because it is, well, I love animals anyway, and it's just that all these characters are so real.
You say it's a book that you loved as a child and you loved as an adult.
Yes.
Has the way that you love it changed from one to the other?
Only that as I get older and I know more about people, I realise just how clever it was. Because as a child you see it, you know, with the animals, and I loved animals, and you fell in love with the characters. But as an adult I see how very clever it is because it is based on real personalities.
Yes.
Moving on, the book that surprised you, so something that you didn't expect to like as much as you did, or something that's outside of your usual reading habits.
Because really had a love-hate relationship with Singapore. You know, I loved Singapore is a fascinating place, but the heat really gets you down. But I started reading a lot about the Far East, and there was a big book called Tanamera by Noel Barber, and I started reading it, but I got very bored with the first 2 or 3 chapters, and I thought, I'm never going to get through this. But I don't like books beating me. I won't
Yes.
give up on them. I won't give up on them. And, you know, I'm so glad I didn't give up on this, because it became absolutely stunning and very gripping.
What kind of book is it?
It's based in Malaysia, or Malaya as it was then, in the 1930s, and about 2 families really, a rich Chinese family and a planter's family, and also how the Chinese girl falls in love with the son of the planter, and all the complications there. But it's also covers the Second World War, when the Japanese, of course, overtook Singapore and Malaya, and also beyond that, when you ended up with having sort of communist insurgents actually coming down. I mean, that was still going on when we were out there. In fact, we went for a walk in the jungle, and I was in my husband's jungly outfit, because he said, haven't you got any trousers? And I said, look, I've come to Singapore. What do I need trousers for? Anyway, and so he went in with his shorts and his socks pulled up over, and we went into the jungle. And the place where we were staying, the owner said, just be careful, because you might get shot, because, you know, you look like insurgents, you know, so just be careful. Anyway, we were careful, and we beat our way into the jungle as far as we could with our waxed umbrellas, which was our only weapon, so we didn't get very far. And after about half an hour of streaming with perspiration, we realised we could still hear the logging lorries on the road, and we thought, no, we'll give up here. So we went back, and also there were some nasty big crawly things.
Yeah.
So you don't like to let books beat you, but the jungle you'd let beat you.
Yes. Yeah, I think the reason I read a lot of Far Eastern type books is I'm trying to go back in my mind to that part of my life which was happy, actually. You know, I was happily married at that stage, and it's not so much the place you want to go back to, but the place in your mind.
Yes, yes.
And Singapore will have changed so much I wouldn't recognise it now anyway.
No. So the book that's not for everybody, but that you love.
This may sound a bit strange, but it's The Shipping Forecast, which is a BBC4 book. And I found this, I went on a mini cruise once and I found it in their bookshop. Now, I've always been passionate about The Shipping Forecast because I used to wait for my husband to come back from late night flying. And so I would be up, you know, waiting, and I'd listen to the music, which everybody loves the music.
Yes, yes. It's
you know, it sends you to sleep.
Yes.
And
it's very calming, isn't it?
Oh, it's
even if there are hurricanes.
It's Sailing By Ronald Binge, I think it's called.
Well remembered.
Anyway, it's absolutely beautiful. But then I used to get mesmerised too by the names of the different places. And so in this book, it tells you how these names occurred, the history behind it, and the myths behind them, and where the lighthouses are and everything. And I still dip into it now. You don't get bored with it at all.
Moving on to the book that is a guilty pleasure. Now, I always feel the need to apologise for this category because I don't believe in guilty pleasures. I think if you like something, you can like it. But the book that's a guilty pleasure.
I think that some things are more pleasurable because of the guilt that you feel about them.
That's interesting.
So
that's jolly interesting.
And especially if you can enjoy the guilt with somebody else as well. So actually, I know people get very angry about when you call something a guilty pleasure, but actually the fact that I'm being naughty is all is all part of it.
Oh, you're right. You're absolutely right. Well, I don't know whether it's so guilty as anything, but it's unusual. Monkey, which was translated from the book by Wu Chang-en, and I have to be honest and say I really fell in love with it first on the series on BBC. I don't know if you remember them.
I watched that as a child and I loved it.
Yes.
It was so good.
Oh, I do wish they'd bring it back.
I've got no experience of the book.
No.
But the TV series was brilliant.
Oh, it was so funny, wasn't it?
Yes.
As well, and very, very clever. And I used to sit up with my children and watch that. But yeah, so I do love that. But I don't know that there's anything particularly guilty about it. But there is one book, and again, strangely enough, this was before I had anything to do with the Far East, called Jade. I think it's also known as Jade Uncut, was a later version. And that's by Pat Barr. And that was a really interesting book about two children the children of Christian missionaries in China about the time of the Boxer Rebellion. And they get kidnapped, the children, and it's how she sort of journeys across China and she gets passed from here to there. And I say it's a guilty pleasure because, again, I read it when I was quite young, and my father had brought it home from the library, and he never knew I was sneaking looking, because I didn't really like Enid Blyton and all those sort of books. So I used to sneak his books. So they were probably much too advanced for me. Really. Yes. That's right. But there was a lovely story. So I suppose it was a guilty pleasure in that I nicked it from my father, really.
Which book makes you most want a conversation with the author?
Well, for me, that's easy. It's any book by David Attenborough. I fell in love with him when I was 12, and he was in his 20s. He was doing Zoo Quest, and everyone else was falling, having crushes on film stars. But no, it was David Attenborough for me, because he was a real hero. He was really out there in the jungle. He was holding animals. I've got a thing about animals. So yes, so he's the one that I would love to have a long conversation with.
And do you read everything he's written?
I've read most things, yes. The Zoo Quests and Life on Air, that was very enlightening. Life on Air, which is his life story.
Which must be one hell of a life story.
It is.
Yeah.
But he's such a modest man too. He's lovely. Excuse me, swooning.
No, you swoon away. The book that you loved as a child?
There were two, really. One you don't see now. In fact, I wish I could find the book. What they used to be called the Mary Plain stories, which were about a bear.
Yes.
They were about a bear, and I remember loving that. Partly, I think, because it had my name, and partly because it was a bear. But I loved that one. But also, of course, I'm afraid we go back to The Wind in the Willows.
Yes.
I'm very boring, aren't I, really?
There's absolutely nothing wrong with a book coming in on more than one of these categories.
No.
The book you wish you'd written?
Oh dear. As I say, boring. Wind in the Willows. And maybe another book I would have liked to have written, which I may mention later, is Ghost Ship by Kate Moss, which is a beautiful book, very clever.
Tell us about the book that makes you laugh.
Well, I find Terry Pratchett is the most lovely, lovely author.
Yes.
Anything he writes is not only so funny, but it's also very clever.
Yes.
The things about what's happened to the post office, what's happened to the banks, all these things. There's a great deal of truth in there. But the ones I love most are his witchy ones, like Witches Abroad and Weird Sisters and all that sort of thing.
Are you a bit of a nanny-og?
I am more of a nanny-og than a granny weatherwax, yes, because I've got lots of grandchildren. I live in an awful mess. And I feel there's so much more important things than keeping a tidy house and all the rest of it.
He's such a perceptive observer of human nature.
Absolutely.
And there's so much depth in what he writes that is easy to dismiss as, he writes funny fantasy stuff.
Most favourite of those books for me was Wintersmith, which was about one of the young witches and how she says or does something at the wrong time, and the spirit of winter falls in love with her. Oh. But that is almost a coming of age book where she comes of age. It's very sensitively written, and I love that.
Yes.
And the other one is Lords and Ladies, which is very funny because they had the stick and bucket dance, which they never actually explain what this stick and bucket dance does, but apparently it's quite dangerous. But apparently it had been banned in the book because some elderly gentleman had got very badly injured with it. One can only guess.
We gave you these questions ahead
Yes.
of time, didn't we?
Yes,
Which
we
is
did.
why you're giving us such great answers. Helps you. But you gave us the same answer for two of them, which was the book that makes you cry and the book that makes you think.
Yes. And that was Jonathan Livingston's Seagull by Richard Bach. It's very deep, and it's about a seagull who goes against the flock, and so he gets thrown out because he believes in pushing boundaries, and he wants to fly freer and higher than anyone else and all the rest of it, and he ends up teaching other seagulls how to do it. And I think it's quite a spiritual book in a way, that he almost finds heaven as a result of it. It makes me cry because I gave it to my brother. My brother was a wonderful man. He died at the age of 46 with a brain tumour, unfortunately. This was a long time ago, before they were able to deal with that sort of thing. He was very spiritual himself, and he was an architect and an artist, and I was very close to him, and I gave it to him because I thought it might help him about flying and pushing boundaries and the spiritual world beyond sort of thing.
A lot of the books you've mentioned would fit this next category, but the book that takes you back.
Yes, that's Three Men in a Boat by Jerome K. Jerome. That again was one of my father's books, which I've still got in its original sort of leather outside. And I read that when I was quite young, and I just found it so funny. And apparently it wasn't meant to be funny. I think originally it was going to be sort of like the story of three men on a boat with a dog called Montmorency, and travelling up and down the Thames. It was meant to be more like a travelogue. But as it turned out, I mean, it's hilarious. The bit where Harris is leading them through Hampton Court maze, and everyone's following him because everyone's lost, and they keep on picking up more people. Like, there's a young woman who's carrying a baby with a bun and all this sort of thing. And then after a bit of a while, and people saying, "Are you sure you knew where you're going?" And he said, "Oh yes, just stick with me." And then she said, "But my baby dropped that bun five rounds ago, and we passed it 5 times." And I mean, and how they try to open a tin of pineapple, and they haven't got a tin opener, and that's very funny. And the Irish stew they make, where they just use up everything they've got left, and the dog thinks he's got to take part as well because he's a little terrier, and he goes off and gets a dead rat and brings it, and they have to debate whether they put it in the stew or not. It ties in very much with a journey I once took up the Thames with somebody who delivered boats, and he had to deliver this luxury yacht up the Thames and drop it off at Marlow. He was someone I played the guitar with two guys that I used to play the guitar with, and he came. We used to meet up and practice, and he said, "I need some crew to do this next weekend. Can you come?" Well, his cousin Derek could come, and Derek's father, who came as the engineer, and I was supposed to go as the cook. I managed to get time off hospital, but it wasn't a luxury yacht as we would think, because although it had central heating on board and everything, nothing was working. And in fact, the gas ran out on us on the first evening, which was lucky because I couldn't cook. They didn't realise this, but I wasn't going to miss the trip.
So the book that not enough people know about.
Well, I've got a book called The House of Doors, and it's by Tan Twang Eng. I only knew about it because being a massive fan of Waterstones, and I'm always in there, they were selling signed editions of it, and I thought, I'll have that and read about it, because again, Malaya, drawing me all the time. And it was amazing, that book. It covers some of the history of Somerset Maugham, about sort of illicit love and all sorts of things. He's got the most sensitive and lovely way of writing. The House of Doors, anyway, is the name, and that is well worth reading. if you like, very sensitive and quite challenging situations. And it brings back memories. Well, it gives you a lot of facts, actually, about Somerset Maugham as well.
Can you remind our listeners who Somerset Maugham was?
He was a writer back in the 1920s, 30s, and he wrote a lot about the Far East.
The author whose books you will always read, even without knowing what they're about, just because you have such trust of
Clearly David Attenborough.
Oh,
yes.
Absolutely, yes. David Attenborough. And Terry Pratchett and John le Carré. I love his books. And, Tan Twang Eng as well, which I'm hoping he's going to write more. Alexander McCall Smith, I think he's a very clever writer. I love his Ladies First Detective Agency, and also Scotland Street.
Yes.
Those are very, very funny. But I also love the Scandinavian writers like Henning Mankell, who does Inspector Wallander.
Yes, I like him.
Yes, but also Stieg Larsson. He had to put an extra I in it because there was already a Stieg Larsson, and he wrote, of course, that was made into a film, the Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, but also there are 2 other books in that. Thing, which I have read. You see, I'm not really into horror and things, but some of that in there could have been almost horror. It's a hard read in that way, and so are his 2 other books. But what I love about them, I know this sounds funny, is they have comfort breaks. This sounds silly, but their characters will stop off for a comfort break and things. Now, whereas I did read, what was that one, written about the chalice, the...
What do you mean, Dan Brown?
Yes, Dan Brown. Yes. And I didn't like that because there was so much crammed into about 24 or 48 hours, which I thought they'd been over there for a long time, and they never stopped for a comfort break. I thought, this isn't normal. I mean, this... Whereas in the Scandinavian books, they're much more natural.
Henning Mankell, in the Wallander series, he describes it in degrees. It was 21 degrees Celsius, doesn't he?
For
That's
a horrible moment, I thought you were going to say he describes the comfort break, which I'm not sure anybody needs that. No. What was the last great book that you read?
I've read a lot since this, but the one that sticks in my mind is The Ghost Ship by Kate Moss. That was amazing. I wasn't expecting to like it, to be honest, because I'm not a historical sort of person.
Tell us a bit more about the book. Well, for those who don't know.
It's in France, and it's about a very poor family. There were twins. The little boy, who's the favourite, dies, and the little girl is brought up then as a boy, and it's partly to do with inheritance. In order to get inheritance. And then on the other side, there's this rich family that own a shipping company, and there's a young girl there who she's quite she doesn't stick to the rules and things.
Right.
She likes to do her own thing, and to cut a long story short, she ends up actually running her own ship. And she meets this, who she thinks is a young boy, and he comes on board a bit like her cabin boy, and they actually fall in love. And of course then they do realise, and it's a forbidden love.
Right.
I can't remember why she turns into a pirate, but it's quite interesting.
So there's a lot going.
I mean, there's so much to the story, I wouldn't really know where to start or stop. But if anyone wants a really, really interesting, good read with a lot of interesting human beings in it and all the emotions, there's romance in it, which I don't normally read romantic things. I don't know why, and I certainly can't write them.
The book that isn't a book, so it could be music or a film, something like that, that has a really good story.
I personally don't like Mahler very much as a composer, but he wrote his Fifth Symphony with the third movement, and there's something about that really touches my soul. I can't explain it. It takes me up into like a spirit world almost, which is extraordinary, as I don't like the rest of his work. But if they play that, it really affects my emotions very, very much. And then in the art world, The Kiss by Klimt is very, very beautiful and very moving.
Yes.
But I have to say now, I have met an artist who lives in Bournemouth who is absolutely brilliant, Alexander Dacres. He's had exhibitions in New York and Tokyo and everywhere. And I've got a print of his... do you remember the book Pi? The Life of Pi,
yes.
With the tiger. And he's done the most beautiful picture of this tiger coming out of the sea or swimming towards... And I knew exactly what it was. Yeah. His work is amazing. He inspires me very much.
You haven't read but don't know why. Something that everybody else has read and has somehow passed you by.
I think most people probably know The Lord of the Rings. I've got an old battered book that belonged to my brother, and I'm determined to read it one day. But I've never actually read it. I've seen little bits of film, but I haven't even watched the film.
Do you know why you've not read it?
I'm not quite sure. I think to start with, I thought it was going to be too complicated and too big a book. That was when I was bringing up children, though, and moving house all the time, being a Navy wife and things like that. But I think now is the time when I think I should get down to it. Because I love any sort of little fantasy books and things like that. And this, of course, it's a big one that set a whole new genre.
I came across something online literally in the last day or so. Someone was pointing out that although Lord of the Rings is often regarded as the book that established all the cliches of the fantasy genre, it actually subverts a lot of the cliches. You've got the long lost heir who's coming back to claim his kingdom, but he's not the hero. He sees himself as the decoy who lets the hero get on the hero work. And lots of other things like that. Although it establishes all the cliches, it does it in a way that is a fresh take on them, that everyone who's copied it has then lived.
So it's spawned a genre, but it's a fresh take on the genre that it spawned.
More original than everything that's copied it.
You've written quite a lot of books. Which is your favourite? Can you choose? Is it like choosing your own child?
I do like Green Smarties because it was quite healing in a way. Because my marriage ended up in a divorce, I wrote it absolutely truthfully. And it's interesting that some of the feedback I've had on Amazon is that, it's a book full of interest and funny things, and then there's like a sharp piece of ice at the end. But I think that was healing for me. My youngest son only got as far as the bit where I got stuck in the bath with his father in a hotel. So he has never read it, but it's the sort of book that you can dip in and out of, really, because there are different stories in each chapter. But I also enjoy the Nellie and Sybil's because they cheer me up when I write them. And I can usually write them quite quickly. And also I did enjoy writing the fantasy book. Partly because I'm hoping this will help some people going through mental anxiety and all the problems that are going on.
I was going to say, in answer to the question, which of your books is your favourite, you have then gone through all of your books.
Apart from Stealth Virus Conspiracy.
So that one must be rubbish.
No, it's not so much that. It's rather serious, and it brings back a very painful part, watching my son suffer and everything.
Well, thank you so much, Mary. It's been so lovely hearing more about you and more about what makes you tick.
No one's ever found the off switch.
If we could bottle what makes you tick, we'd make quite a lucrative living, I think.
Oh, bless you. I've had a wonderful time. Thank you so much for giving me this opportunity. And you've certainly made me think about the books that have shaped my life.
Brilliant.
So thank you very much.
Thank you.